So I love listening to the podcasts whenever I'm traveling or while walking. So here I would recommend top podcast which would help you in changing your mindset and become better version of yourself. So the first podcast which I would like to share is On Purpose with the Jay Shetty. So as we all know, Jay Shetty is a very well-known spiritual leader. So in his podcast, he basically conducts interviews with various neuroscientists and therapists, which talk about reprogramming your mind in order to be successful. And I would say his podcast is usually around 1 hour, which you can listen whenever you have some good amount of time. So the next podcast would be Mindset Mentor by Rob Dial. So Rob Dial is my favorite mindset mentor because he gives practical techniques in order to become a better version of yourself and how you can lead a conscious life instead of being in an autopilot mode. His podcast is usually 20 minutes each and he shares them on everyday basis. So yeah, you cannot afford to miss his episode. So the next podcast would be Gita for the Young and Restless by J.R. Rao. So J.R. Rao is a very well-known speaker on Indian philosophy, and she shares this podcast specifically for millennials who don't have enough time to go into deep understanding of Gita shloks. So she basically tries to give small description of how you can inculcate those shloks into your life. So I would definitely recommend listening to that podcast. Last but not the least would be Calmly Coping by Dr. Garcia. So she is a licensed therapist and she has designed this podcast specifically for overachievers who suffer from high functioning anxiety and people who take pressure on themselves in order to achieve their goals. So in her podcast, she tells about how we can deal with those anxiety, and she also tells that it is completely okay if we feel burnt out and how we can achieve our goals. Her podcast is also around 30 minutes each, and she usually shares her podcast every 2 or 3 times in a week. So yeah, I would definitely recommend listening to her. So yeah, these are the top podcasts which I definitely would want everyone you to just at least listen once and just tell me your experience. So yeah, thank you. Bye bye.